Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're tackling a huge historical shift. The move from the Soviet Union to modern Russia.
Absolutely massive. We've got sources covering the reforms, the breakup, those tough transitions, new leaders.
Yeah, a whole stack. Our mission is basically to unpack the key moments, maybe some surprising details that shaped this whole transformation.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, so where does the story really begin? I guess with Gorbachev, right? Mid-'80s?
Exactly. Mikhail Gorbachev. The Soviet system was under, immense financial strain, really struggling to keep up with U.S. military spending.
So his goal wasn't initially to end it, but more to reform it, revitalize the USSR.
That was the idea. And he brought in these now famous policies. And glasnost. Our sources talk about that as openness to criticism.
Yeah, glasnost. It allowed public discussion, even critique, in a way that was, totally new then. And alongside that was perestroika.
Economic restructuring,
Mm-hmm.
trying to bring in some free market ideas, trying to weave in free market elements into this very rigid planned economy, an attempt to modernize, but the implementation was incredibly difficult.
So loosening things up politically and economically, and also pursuing détente, thawing the Cold War.
Yeah, détente was kind of a necessity. The economic reality was they just couldn't afford the arms race. Simple as that.
Right.
And Gorbachev also promised more democratic elections, letting different parties compete.
Which, surprisingly, showed not much support for the socialists.
Very little, yeah. A real sign things were changing.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the biggest thing, what some sources call his major misstep,
Was pledging not to get involved in the internal politics of the Soviet sphere countries. Poland, Hungary, places like that.
exactly. By saying Moscow wouldn't prop them up anymore, he kind of opened the floodgates.
And speaking of unexpected things, that Pizza Hut ad later on, that detail from the sources is just wild.
Yeah. Quite the post-Soviet footnote.
So after that pledge, countries did start leaving the Soviet sphere fast, like fall 1989.
Astonishingly fast. Poland was the first, sort of the guinea pig. You have figures like Lech Walesa, Pope John Paul II playing big roles, mostly nonviolent there.
But not everywhere was peaceful. Romania stands out in the sources.
Oh, absolutely. The bloodiest transition. The leader, Nicolae Ceausescu, and his wife, executed. Christmas Day, 1989, after a really quick trial.
Grim, and then the big symbol, the Berlin Wall coming down, November 89.
Huge moment. Sources describe this atmosphere of like a massive party, hope, people literally taking bulldozers to make more openings, East and West Germany starting to reunify.
A very visible sign of change.
Definitely captured the world's attention. And it's worth noting, nearby Yugoslavia was also falling apart around then. Nationalism, ethnic conflict, Serbia's ethnic cleansing against Bosnian Muslims in the 90s. Eventually, NATO had to step in. A different breakup, but part of that same regional upheaval.
Right, so the outer sphere collapses, and then in 1991, the USSR itself officially dissolves. Splits into 15 countries, Russia's the biggest.
And that transition for Russia was incredibly rough. Trying to switch overnight from socialism, state ownership, to capitalism, and build a democracy at the same time.
Chaos.
Pretty much. They tried giving citizens vouchers, buying power for state industries. But the sources argue insiders figures like, yes, Vladimir Putin managed to grab the key assets first. Oil, gas reserves especially.
Becoming billionaires overnight while most people got left behind.
That's the picture painted. Huge inequality baked in early. Boris Yeltsin became Russia's first leader, 91 to 99, actually elected democratically.
The sources call him a bit of a goofball, loud, over the top.
He definitely had that reputation. Embodied the chaos of the 90s, maybe. But even then, Russia almost immediately started acting aggressively towards the former Soviet republics.
Which kind of sets the stage for Vladimir Putin. He's led Russia for, most of the last 25 years now?
That's right. And under him, the sources point to a steady decrease in real democratic elections. They suggest they aren't legitimate, and, opponents often end up dead or imprisoned.
A very different direction.
Yet, even with quality of life concerns, roads, schools, healthcare, often lagging, Putin sometimes gets framed as restoring Russian pride. The shirtless photos, cultivating that tough guy image.
Right, that whole strongman persona.
It's a deliberate projection of strength. And the war in Ukraine, starting in 2022, our sources present that as the latest, most significant campaign to reconstruct that former sphere of influence. It's part of a pattern.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? You go from Gorbachev's reforms, which kind of accidentally unleash independence, to Yeltsin's messy, unequal shift, and then Putin consolidating power, focusing on reclaiming influence. It's quite a journey.
It really is. Full of dramatic turns, unintended consequences, brutal realities. And makes you think, doesn't it, about the lasting effects of sudden top-down change versus maybe slower, more organic movements.
Yeah, how much of today's world is still shaped by the promises and the problems of that whole period?
It's a big question. Definitely something to keep in mind when you see news coming out of that region today.